Okay, so welcome to another Motivation Inspiration Project interview supporting motivation inspiration, sponsored by Carleen, Paradance UK, in partnership with Paradance UK, and also Chronic Warriors wheelchair boxing, adaptive boxing, but also Birmingham Wheelchair Basketball and Make Change Birmingham CIC, which means Community Interest Company. It's a pleasure to introduce next interviewer, our guest today, Maxwell Ivey. I have pronounced that correctly, have I?
Yes, you got it perfectly.
Oh, thank you, Maxwell. You're a pleasure. So, Maxwell, tell me about your story, because you wasn't always a podcaster. You started in the circus, I believe.
Actually, I started in the carnivals, which y'all would call a fun fair over there, I believe. And actually, my family's been operating carnivals for 4 generations. And one of my cousins is still operating amusement rides and games. He travels from Corpus Christi right on the Gulf Coast all the way to Nebraska and back every year. So he's done very well for himself. But, when I was growing up, I knew I wanted to be in the family business, but I also knew that eventually I was going to lose part, if not most, of my vision. So, from an early age, it was a question of what kind of things can we do to where he feels included in things he wants to do. And I was lucky enough to go to a school that had money, so they were able to hire special education teachers that actually wanted to teach us how to solve problems so that we could learn on our own, as opposed to just pushing us through the system. I had orientation and mobility and Braille instruction in junior high school. And later on, I would join a troop of scouts for the visually impaired and become one of the few blind eagles. So, along the way, I graduated from traditional high school and college. I was part of the family carnival for about 15 years until my dad died in 2003. And by 2006, we were out of the business and I had to find something new to do. So what did I do? I did what I knew something about, and I started helping other people sell their used stuff. And I did that online at the Midway Marketplace. But in order to be online in 2006 and 2007, as a blind person with no money, skills, or talent, I had a lot to learn, including I had to teach myself how to code HTML, which for anybody that's using WordPress, Wix, Square, any of those options to do their website nowadays, y'all should really be thankful that y'all have never had to do that junk, because I still occasionally have nightmares of less thans and greater thans. But I started building that business, helping people sell their used stuff.
Wow.
And and because I had to learn so many things, and because I was blind and that impressed people, I was asked to start sharing more of what it's like to be a blind entrepreneur. And that led to the blindblogger.net, which, led to 4 books, hundreds of podcast interviews, traveling the US solo, speaking and singing in public, eventually starting my own podcast, What's Your Excuse, and so much more. But it all really started in 2007 when I filed for a domain name without having the first clue how I was going to build a website to go with it.
Fantastic. I mean, you are an inspiration about, regards to, a person VI, and I work in a specialist college to support complex disabilities, and we have a lot of young people with visually impaired, and we have tactile services. But growing up, it must have been hard in the schooling environment. How would you say yourself and support people with a VI condition to actually move forward themselves?
Right. Well, as I mentioned, I was lucky to live in a school district that had money, even though my family wasn't personally well off ourselves. And so that helped a lot. But the other thing I think that helped, 2 things. One is when you grow up in a family that operates a small business, whether that's a carnival, a ranch, a farm, a brick and mortar store, whatever, you kind of learn that you're never going to have all the resources you want, that things are not always going to go your way. And so you grow up around people who do things and who don't have a lot of time for feeling sorry for themselves or watching somebody else feel sorry for themselves. So that helped a lot. But also I have retinitis pigmentosa, and for the first 5 or 6 years, I was losing my vision gradually, which meant that while on the one hand, I was constantly having to change the way I did things, on the other hand, I didn't go from having sight to being totally blind. So there was an adjustment period over time. And I went from being able to read a regular print book in a dark room to having to have a lot of light to having to use magnifiers and then eventually a closed circuit TV before changing to doing audio and braille. So I believe that the fact that it was gradual helped me a lot. I understand there are people who have sudden vision loss or are born blind who seem to think it's easier the other way. But the bonus that you get from losing it over time is it teaches you flexibility and adaptability and resilience. And especially it teaches you creative problem solving. So I got a lot of good things from that. As far as my schooling goes, really, it was kind of easy until I got into high school and had to do things like algebra or geometry. And part of that time, we were able to do that with really large pieces of paper. But after that, really, it got to be a matter of memorization and knowing what questions to ask the person that I was working with so that I could fill in the right parts and come up with the right answer. And actually, schooling was one of those things that was really hard because up until junior high school, people used to give my younger brother a hard time because they would have me in their class and then they would expect the same effort and the same ability from my younger brother. And he had the same ability. Actually, he had different abilities. He's more into artistics to mechanics, electronics, and computers, but he didn't have the same work ethic at that time. So he took a lot of grief for being Max's younger brother. Later in life, I've had to adjust to the idea that now he's more successful than I am, and people know him more than they know me. So a lot of times people go, Max, Ivey, are you that painter's brother? And I have to tell them, yeah, I'm that painter's brother. So there were times it was really emotionally difficult because it's like, I know I'm still the same student, but because of the limited technology that was available at that time, I'm not able to perform the work the same way I used to, or at the same level that I used to, because I can't see the paper and work the problems on the paper or the blackboard myself. So there were some times where that was very frustrating, and thankfully you can get to a point in your education where you don't have to take more math.
Obviously, we talk about schooling and growing up, but who motivates and inspires you and gives you that passion to push yourself?
Right. Well, it all starts with my grandmother and my dad, both of whom are passed on now. In the earlier days of the carnival business, it was a seasonal affair, and the kids would generally stay during the school year with older aunts, uncles, or grandparents. So I spent a lot of time with my grandmother and learned a lot of important things from her. And then later on, when I was an adult, me and my dad would usually spend a lot of time in the truck together each week, getting the equipment from one town to the next town. Basically because they didn't want me setting up and taking down rides unless it was absolutely necessary, because they didn't want me to get hurt, because half the time we couldn't trust the people that were setting up and taking down the equipment to look out for the equipment and Max at the same time. So I spent a lot of time in the truck with my dad, and he taught me a lot of important things. And one of the most important things I learned from him is this whole, if you don't ask, they can't say yes, because I used to do the bookings for our carnival, and people were going to be shocked by this, but I would do cold calling and then later on cold emailing. But for 10 years, I ran our booking operation from a Perkins Braille writer. No computer, no phone, no tablet. I mean, there were times we'd have to stop on the side of the road and go to a payphone and call people and see if they wanted to let you set your rides up on their shopping center. So, so he taught me, and there would be times where, you'd call 10 or 12 or 20 people in a row and they'd all say no. And I'd get disgusted. He'd go, look, Max, if you don't ask, they can't say yes. Now stop complaining and call that next number I give you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Maxwell. do you think what this is why it's so important though for motivation to support others? What, is it something that we need to keep pressing with motivation and inspiration to show and get that support to people?
Right. Well, I believe it's very important. And I'll tell you, one of the other things that really motivates me is it took me over 2 years to accept the fact that I am somebody who inspires and motivates other people. That was a really hard struggle for me. But once I accepted that by sharing my experiences and showing people that there are ways to overcome their obstacles, as once people started saying that I was inspirational and started sharing their stories with me, it became sort of like an obligation. It's like, okay, Max, by showing up and doing your work every day, you've convinced people that you're an inspiration. They find you special. So what happens if you don't show up? Well, in my mind, if I stop showing up, that means I could be disappointing a lot of people. Now, I don't say that with ego. I just say that that's how I feel. I feel like if there are probably not as many people as some of my friends think who follow my progress, but there are probably more than a few who, if Max stops showing up, then they may wonder why should they keep trying. So for me, motivation is more by example and implication than it is straight one-to-one contact. But the other thing about motivation that I really wish more people would understand is for those of us like me and you, who in our minds aren't really doing anything special at the time, but we understand that it looks challenging. So other people are impressed and inspired. I want to know, what did I inspire you to do? I mean, did you actually say, Max is doing a blog or a podcast and I want to do a podcast, so I'm going to start my podcast today or next week? For people like you guys that play a fast-paced, challenging sport with a much more challenging disability than mine, in my opinion, my humble opinion.
Thank you.
When people see y'all play, do they just think, man, that's inspiring, and go home and drink a beer? Or do they think, man, that's inspiring, I want to coach the team, or I want to become more physically fit and a healthier human being so I can be around so to me, motivation is one of those things, it's really meaningless unless it causes action. So I tell people all the time, I don't mind you saying I inspired you. Just tell me, what did I inspire you to do? Because inspiration without action is meaningless, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there, to be honest, because you're right. It's, when we go and speak to people about, doing our activities and being active, they, in some respects, depending on who you're working with, they don't see the complete goal, so to speak. And our mission is to get people active and show them that whatever, if you've got a disability, a non-disability, a condition, an issue, even having a bad day or in crisis, there's something positive that you can do yourself to support others or support yourself. And I think you're right. People do say we are an inspiration, and we motivate people. But as you say, if I didn't turn up the following day, would somebody carry on what we do? I don't know, unless that they're ready to do that and ready to put themselves out there as well. It's a difficult question. Perhaps we'll never know until I finally, or yourself finally retires.
Well, I personally have no interest in retirement, because it seems to me the people that live the longest and are the happiest doing it are the people who find something they are good at that they enjoy doing, and they just keep doing it. I mean, Betty White, Steven Spielberg, what's the guy, the comic book guy, Stan Lee, so as long as I can still physically do what I do and encourage other people, and as long as people still need that encouragement, I have no plans to quit. I mean, my plan would be just to hire a whole bunch of people so I don't have to do nothing but show up and talk. That would be my plan.
Fantastic. Thinking about, obviously, resilience and supporting the community, how do we then support inclusion and diversity in the community and build on resilience?
Well, I'm not exactly sure how building on resilience applies to it, but I think one thing I've learned about diversity, inclusion, is we can talk all day about somebody including us because it's the right thing to do. But when we can show them a positive benefit to including us, then we get change. And my personal favorite example of this is with the alternative text tags for images on websites for the visually impaired. For years, I would tell other webmasters, and I said this at one conference even, look, you really should be adding these alternative text tags because it makes it easier for the visually impaired. In fact, if you don't put those, we don't know your pictures are there. And sometimes that means we don't know your links are there. And people would listen to me and then they'd walk away and do nothing. But when I found out that Google, Bing, and all the other search engines index the alternative tag descriptions, and I could start telling webmasters, hey, you know, you're missing a chance to be found in the search engines by not doing this. Then it's like, oh, wait a minute, how do I do that again? And then you see WordPress and other website development programs, they add those boxes into their operating systems, so people don't even have to think about it. They don't have to remind themselves. It's right there prompting them to do it. So these are, you know, examples where when it can prove to be helpful to other people, then right away we are going to be more welcome and more included. It's difficult to do those things. I think two things that would really help would be more definitive documented research on customer loyalty among people with disabilities and employee responsibility or loyalty among people with disabilities. Because my anecdotal research tells me that as a disabled person, I am more likely to buy from a company that makes the effort and shows me that they appreciate and want my business to the point that I will even overpay for their products in order to do business with a company that respects me and my business. And as employees, I find that creative solutions finding that all of us people with disabilities have to learn from the get-go is a very valuable commodity to employers. We are generally more loyal, more dedicated. That's not true of everybody, but it's not true of everybody in any other group either. So I think if we could better document and better express the additional value of a customer or an employee who has a disability, I think that would go a long way towards more inclusion.
Thank you, Max. I mean, yeah, we think about the community, and you're absolutely right about, you know, perhaps there needs to be more with businesses, employers, employees, that more awareness of supporting disabilities, because obviously we talk about young people coming through now and, you know, going through possibly it's their time now with, you know, regards to impacting on trauma, disabilities, dealing with disabilities, the conditions, still learning themselves as they go through that journey. But what would your message be to support them in their daily life if they're, you know, experiencing these kinds of barriers towards potential employment or potentially be active in their daily life?
Right. Well, I would say one very important place to start is in their community. And I don't mean the overall large disability community. I mean that as a person. And one of the things I do when I talk to school kids, whether they're disabled or not, is I talk to them about how that at this point in their life, they have the opportunity to start building a network of people who they will be able to rely on as they go forward in their life. And the sooner they start doing that, the better off there will be. So in your community, you want people who will encourage you, support you, who will remind you of your value, even when an employer, say, doesn't see enough value to want to make an accommodation to hire you. You know, your community who will help you ask the right questions, help you have better conversations. So I think a lot of that really starts with the people you surround yourself from an early age. And I agree with you. This is a really exciting time in the area of people with disabilities, because with technology, with the shortage of available workforce in the country, and not just in the US, but also in other countries around the world, there's a new pressure to find new workforce. And in many cases, there's a huge number of people with disabilities who have the skills that are needed. And now the employers, are motivated to hire them or find a way to include them. So that would be it. I would say also, as much as you can, try to have as many varied experiences during your education as possible. Take full advantage of the summer camps, of the between school break educational programs. I tell you, I really had my eyes open, and I thought I knew a lot. But in 2019, I went to the Level Up Conference, which is put on by Envisions. Their home base is Wichita, but they're now in 3 or 4 different states. And they put on a camp where they basically expose these teenagers to all the possibilities. So I'm there for a week. I'm there to teach them how to tie a tie, how to shave. I'm there to teach them living skills and elevator pitch and interview skills. And the whole week I'm thinking, these kids are studying aerospace and building model planes and drones. These kids are studying culinary arts and creating masterpieces in the kitchen. They're studying electrical engineering and modifying those Power Wheels cars so that two of the staff's kids would be able to drive the Power Wheel just like the neighbors in their neighborhood play with their Power Wheels. So at the end of that week, I'm like, because of Envisions and because of Boeing's investment in Envisions, once a year, these kids are exposed to things that just have to blow their minds. And so that's another thing I would really encourage you to do. And of course, when possible, find a mentor. And that's why one of the things I make a sincere effort to do whenever I do a podcast is to let people know that I want y'all to reach out to me. I'm open to awkward questions. I'm open to suggestions. If you want to say you saw me on a show and I was amazing, or you want to say you saw me on a show and I was full of malarkey or whatever, fine. But, reach out through theblindblogger.net. Let's have a conversation. Let's meet, let's connect, and let's see how we can help each other move forward. And there may come a time when I may know somebody or something, or may have had an experience that will help you. So, and that part there, again, goes back to community. And when all else fails, never be afraid to ask for help, and never be afraid to ask what you think may be a stupid question, because sometimes just by asking that question to the right person at the right time, you can make a huge change in your situation.
Thanks, Max. We talk about mental well-being and mental health. Obviously, since the pandemic, since COVID, it's on the increase now. I think we're just starting to see now the effects of mental health, especially in young people. With regards to your own experiences, how do you take care of your mental well-being as part of your daily life, and how does this build on your resilience and determination?
Right. Well, I think I've always had a pretty good system. I try to exercise 30 minutes or so a day, usually on my stationary bike, or as I call it, the bike that doesn't go anywhere. And that actually used to be funny until they started running a commercial about an insurance company where some guy riding a stationary bike, the bike actually took off on him. So that was funny. I listen to a lot of books on audio. I listen to old time radio shows. I communicate with a lot of people online, either by the phone or Zoom or messages. And I also, I give talks, I do podcast interviews. And here's one of the things I wish more people understood about what me and you are doing right now. We're having a conversation. We are, for all intents and purposes, 2 guys hanging out, having a chat. Well, here's the thing. There is an emotional value to having an actual conversation as opposed to exchanging messages on Facebook or Twitter or your phone. So I really look forward to these. I mean, when I know that I'm going to go live with something like this, I take my shower, I get my shave, I put on my good clothes, I put on my headphones, and I'm like, yes, we're going to go have some fun now. So the fact doing these conversations, whether I'm the host or the guest, I feel has an emotional value. So, if y'all can have conversations with people in person, fine, but try to do less text and more live. Try to read a good book, and it doesn't have to be nonfiction. It can just be a challenging book of fiction that entertains you. Try to educate yourself through podcasts, through videos, through, sometimes you find some great lessons in books and movies. And so that's what I would say. Exercise is really good. And I tell you, the more I learn about what y'all do, the more I'm like, Max, you really need to step up your physical fitness programs. I had a session with my orientation and mobility instructor the other day because I want to improve my cane skills so I can get a guide dog. And she's like, Max, do you think maybe next time we could make it all the way to the stop sign? And I said, well, how far is that? She said, I think it's about a quarter of a mile. I said, well, I don't know if we can, but let's just say we're going to and figure out a way anyway. So yeah, I maintain. So those are some of the things I do. I enjoy sports on the radio or TV. And basically, whatever you can find that will distract you, entertain you, educate you, or inspire you, then that's good for your mental health. Just this morning, I was watching Price is Right with my brother, and he's rooting for one of the contestants to lose because they overbid one of the other contestants by $1, and that contestant lost, and he got so happy. And my mom said, Max, that ain't right. I said, look, if it makes him that happy, I'm gonna root right along with him for them to lose, because it's good for his mental health. And oh, by the way, my brother Patrick, he's 7 years younger than me. 3 years ago, he had an attack of arrhythmia that they say 99% of people who have that are killed with their first attack. So I'm so happy to still have him in my life. If that makes him feel better, I'm going to let him, if watching the memes on Facebook and Twitter and then sharing those with me makes him feel good, I'm good with it.
Fantastic. We have a quick fire round that we've put into our interviews now, Max. And
all right, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do my best to play by the rules. Okay.
All right. Okay. So it's 5 quick fire round questions.
All right.
If you can go up with obviously a one-word answer to each one, that'd be great. If you can't, that's fine. I don't mind a couple of sentences. That's okay.
All right.
So are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is your favorite food?
Pizza.
Okay. Favorite drink?
Hazelnut latte.
Okay. Favorite film or TV show?
TV, Midsummer Murders.
Okay. Favorite music?
Man, that is so hard, but I'm going to go with country.
Okay. And final quick fire question. It's a bit of a long one, so you've got a good sentence for this. If you had a superhero power, what would that be and why?
Well, that's a difficult question because I feel like I already have several superhero powers,
I sort of knew you were going to say that to me.
Because I have the fearless ability to ask for what I want. I basically take on a lot of challenges that other people would run away from. But I would say if we're talking superpowers, it always has to come down to flying, I think.
Fantastic. What would you pick flying?
It just seems like, it seems like the coolest of them, but I like the way Tony Stark does it better than I like the way Superman does it.
Fair enough. Okay. I've got 2 final questions for you, Max. So, all
right.
What is the future goal for Maxwell of Ivey?
Okay, well, I would say the future goal, at least for now, is the What's Your Excuse podcast network to help more people who have disabilities start their own podcasts so they can share their stories, they can promote their organizations, their businesses, their brands, to help existing podcast hosts grow their audiences through a community of podcasters who either have a disability or who are able-bodied but want to support the various disability communities. People can find that at wyexcuse.com/shows and see what we have on there so far. I really feel like down the road, not only is it going to help these people grow their shows so that those who want to can monetize, and those who don't want to monetize can use them to advocate and change people's opinions or awareness. And I really hope that at some point it's going to lead to helping these podcasters create books, movies, albums, courses, and merchandise, and help them promote those new products and services better so that they can make real money from doing all the hard work it takes to do a podcast.
Thank you, Max. Our final question, and it usually gets a few people stumped, is if you could think of a quote to support motivation and inspiration, what would that quote be and why?
A a quote to support motivation and inspiration. It's hard not using one of my own, so I'm going to go to the second movie from the original Star Wars trilogy, where Yoda tells Luke, when that ship of his is stuck in the swamp on Dagobah, Yoda tells Luke, there is no big or small, there only is. And to me, this one is important because quite often we get hung up by a new challenge because we think it's bigger or scarier than a past challenge. But in many cases, it's really not the challenge. It's just that we've gotten in our heads that it's different. So I try to remember that one because it helps keep me from being overwhelmed. And I find that for most people, if they think about stuff too much, they will scare themselves. They will overwhelm themselves. They will talk themselves out of it. So I like it. It forces me to remember times in my past when I accomplished difficult things, when I overcame setbacks. And anybody that's listening to us right now has those moments in their past. They just have to sit down and make a list and think about them. And then when they get in a situation they think is bigger than themselves, remember what they've already done. So I don't know if that's exactly what you're looking for, but if I'm not going to use one of my own catchphrases, I think that's the best I got.
Maxwell, Ivey, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. You are the blind blogger. I look forward to meeting you again and chatting with you as two guys hanging out. It's been a pleasure, as you know, to meet somebody who is such an inspiration to so many people in your country and hopefully in our country as well and worldwide. And I hope people see this and take note of what you've said and get in touch with you to continue your journey and our journey towards bringing people together, supporting our community, and getting people into that mindset that you can put yourself into and accomplish whatever you need to accomplish in your life or daily life and keep pushing forward. Maxwell, Ivey, thank you very much.
Well, you're very welcome. I appreciate your time and willingness to let me speak to your audience. And I look forward to hopefully sometime soon meeting in person, if not online again.
Thank you, Maxwell. You take care. Stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.